Top 3 Scariest School Bus Horror Stories That Will Send Shivers Down Your Spine. You've heard stories about haunted houses, creepy woods, and things that go bump in the night, but what about the school bus? The one that takes you home after a long day, the one that feels so safe, so routine? What if I told you that some school buses are home to far more than just kids and their backpacks? What if they carry dark, malevolent forces that you can never escape? Listen closely, because these stories will haunt you long after you hear them. And if you feel that chill creeping up your spine, if your heart starts to race, don't turn away. Story 1. The Empty Seat. It was 2005 when a high school student, Sarah, first noticed something strange about her ride home. Every day without fail, she sat in the back corner of the bus, right next to a window. But one day she glanced at the seat across from her and noticed something different, something wrong. An empty seat. Now, that wouldn't have been so strange if it weren't for the fact that no one was supposed to be sitting there. The bus was full, but there was a vacant spot, as if someone was waiting to sit there. At first, Sarah ignored it. She tried to push it out of her mind, convinced it was just her imagination. But the next day the seat was still empty. And the day after that. And every day it seemed like the seat was getting closer to her, just inches away from her own. The whispering started soon after. Barely audible at first, like a voice in the back of her head. It was soft, seductive, tempting her to look at the empty seat. And every time she did, her stomach churned. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. She couldn't explain it, but she knew something was wrong. One afternoon, as the bus took the familiar turn down her street, Sarah noticed something truly terrifying. The bus had stopped, but the empty seat was now occupied. A dark figure, cloaked in shadows, sat there, its eyes hollow and cold. Sarah froze. She couldn't scream. She couldn't move. She was paralyzed, trapped, her mind screaming at her to run, but her body wouldn't respond. The figure didn't say a word, but its eyes, those eyes locked with hers, sending a wave of terror so intense that she swore she could feel its cold fingers crawling up her spine. And then the whisper came. "You're next." That night she couldn't sleep. She could still hear the whispering in her ears. Even when the lights were off, even when the world was still, she heard it. "You're next." And Sarah knew deep down that it wasn't just a story. The nightmare was far from over. Story 2. The Bus Driver Who Never Left. Ryan was just a kid when he first saw the driver. He wasn't like the other bus drivers. There was something off about him. His eyes, pale and sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. His skin so pale it looked like it had been drained of life. His hands, gripping the wheel with unnatural strength, never moving. Ryan had been riding the bus for years, but this driver, this one was different. One day, as the bus drove down a secluded road near the woods, the engine sputtered and died. The driver didn't say a word. He just sat there, staring straight ahead like a mannequin. The kids on the bus waited for him to say something, to make a move, but he just sat there in complete silence. Minutes passed. The air became thick with tension. The kids tried to open the doors, but they were stuck. The windows refused to budge. No one could move. They were trapped inside with the driver, who wasn't quite human anymore. And then the bus lights flickered. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine as the driver's head turned, slowly, impossibly slow, until his hollow, lifeless eyes were staring directly at him. "Do you know why the bus never stops?" the driver whispered, his voice like the rustling of dead leaves. Ryan didn't respond. He couldn't. And that's when it happened. The door opened. The bus wasn't parked. It was moving, but not on the road. Ryan glanced out the window and saw nothing but endless darkness. The bus was drifting through the air, over fields, over houses. No one could hear their screams. No one would ever find them. They were lost, trapped with a driver who never left, who never aged, and who would never let them go. And in that moment, Ryan understood. They were dead. And they had been dead for a very long time. Story 3. The Bus That Came for Her. This last story comes from a girl named Emily. She had always been the kind of person to walk home from school, preferring to avoid the bus altogether. But one day something strange happened. She was late and the bus was already parked outside. It was too late to walk. So she reluctantly boarded. The inside of the bus was darker than usual, the seats worn and stained, the smell of mildew thick in the air. Emily sat near the back, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in her gut. But the more she looked around, the more she realized something was terribly wrong. No one was there. The bus was completely empty. Not a single other student was on board. When the driver finally spoke, his voice was low and cold, almost mechanical. "Where are you going?" he asked. Emily, confused, answered, "Home." The driver didn't say another word. He simply nodded and the bus began to move. But as it drove down the road, Emily's stomach twisted. She knew something was off. She couldn't explain it, but she knew. The road outside was unfamiliar. The houses, the trees, all seemed like they didn't belong. Then she saw it. The bus was driving straight toward an open field, where the earth was cracked and barren. The road turned into nothingness. The bus didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It kept going faster until the field turned into a dark abyss, and Emily realized the bus wasn't just taking her home. It was taking her somewhere else. Somewhere from which no one ever returned. She slammed her fist against the window, screaming for help, but there was no one to hear. The driver just stared ahead, unmoved. The darkness swallowed the bus whole. And Emily was never seen again. Do you feel it? That cold breath on the back of your neck? The whispers in your ears? If you've heard these stories and felt the fear crawling up your spine, then it's too late. You've been marked, and the nightmare doesn't stop here. Subscribe now and make sure you never miss the next horrifying tale. Because something has followed you, something that was waiting for you to hear the stories, waiting for you to join it. The nightmares are just beginning.